Welcome, champions, to the next overview and tier list ranking, on any new or reworked champion for the current event active for idle champions. This is where we'll break down their mechanics and place them in my overall tier list for every champion in the game. But before we dive in, you know we gotta take a look real quick at the fact that I'm streaming over on Twitch, and if you stop on in, you just might have a chance to see my cat. So drop in and say hi. We'll be covering Cazrin on Twitch the same time I release this video. For this event, we're getting the classic one new champion, one reworked champion. The reworked champion following the new champion 1 week later. The new champion is going to be a fresh member of the Fallbacks affiliation, Cazrin, the chaotic good human wizard in Seat 10, serving the group as a DPS and a support. She will shoot 2 magic missiles at random enemies, preferring different targets if possible. And her ultimate will be a Fallbacks Fireball, where she attacks all enemies with her version of a fireball. Now for those familiar with the Fallbacks, you know that means she's coming with her own instance of Uggy, a passive all of the Fallbacks share, where Uggy joins the party starting next to Cazrin, unless Uggy is already in the formation next to a different Fallbacks champion. Uggy will increase the damage of all non-adjacent champions. And through Unctuous Uggy, Cazrin will scale this damage up, as do all of the other Fallbacks champions, compiling together to all contribute to a decent group-wide buff. The more Fallbacks we get, the more powerful this becomes. The main source of damage buffing from Cazrin comes from Sunny Disposition, where Cazrin increases the damage of all champions in her column, including herself, and the columns in front of her. She increases her own damage with Library of Lore, where whenever a boss is defeated for the first time in an adventure, it drops a book that Cazrin collects. Subsequent kills of the same boss have a 10% chance of dropping an additional book. The maximum number of books that can be collected during a single adventure is the highest area reached, divided by 5, rounded down. Cazrin keeps track of both the number of books she has collected in the current adventure, as well as the size of her library, which is the number of books she has collected across all of her adventures. Cazrin's damage is increased by 10% for each book in her library, stacking additively. However, each time her library reaches a new order of magnitude, the base buff is multiplicatively increased by 100%. With In Search of Knowledge, Cazrin's attacks and abilities gain additional effects based on the number of the books she has collected in the current adventure. At 10 plus books, Cazrin fires an additional magic missile with her base attack. At 40 plus, she increases the effect of Sunny Disposition by 5% for each book she has collected in the current adventure, stacking multiplicatively. At 80 plus, Cazrin fires an additional magic missile with her base attack. At 120 plus, when triggered, Mage Armor is now cast on all champions in the formation instead of just Cazrin. And for the record, Mage Armor will make it so the first time anyone in the formation takes damage in each area, Cazrin will cast Mage Armor on herself. Champions affected by Mage Armor decrease the damage they take by 25%. At 160 plus books, she will increase the effect of Unctuous Uggy by 1% for each book Cazrin has collected in the current adventure, stacking additively. 200 plus, support champions affected by Mage Armor have 40% chance to deal an additional 5 seconds of bud damage with each normal attack hit. At 240 plus, Mage Armor's damage prevention is increased to 50%. And finally, at 300 plus, for each tanking champion affected by Mage Armor, the effect of Sunny Disposition is increased by 400%, stacking multiplicatively. For Cazrin's first set of specializations, she has the options of Self-Taught, where Cazrin increases the damage bonus of Sunny Disposition by 100% for each Fallbacks champion and/or champions with a melee and/or ranged base attack in the formation, stacking multiplicatively. Ancestor's Shadow, where Cazrin increases the damage bonus of Sunny Disposition by 100% for each Fallbacks champion and/or good champion in the formation, stacking multiplicatively. Or Lost in the Library, where whenever a boss drops a book, Cazrin instead collects 3 books. The maximum number of books she can collect during this adventure is tripled, but In Search of Knowledge's base per book damage boost to Sunny Disposition is reduced from 5% to 1.65%. Now, this first specialization does have equipment tied to it, and this also scales with the pre-stack, so it is very important to pick the one with the highest amount of options. That being said, the equipment only affects Self-Taught and Ancestor's Shadow. It has no effect whatsoever on Lost in the Library. The second choice is between Signature Smell, where when Uggy is with Cazrin, each damage increase that Uggy would normally apply to other members of the formation instead applies to Cazrin herself, stacking multiplicatively. Think of this in a way like Cthulhu, but for herself. This is very much a way to give her a potent personal DPS increase. But of course, you'll want to slot her with as many fallbacks champions as possible. And with this already being a high output, it's only going to increase the more fallbacks champions we get in the future. Or Smell Mastery, where when Uggy is with Cazrin, In Search of Knowledge's per book bonus for Sunny Disposition is increased by 100%. So essentially the second pick is she going to be your DPS or is she going to be a support? Her equipment is overall good, her first being reserved for all champ damage, the second for her Library of Lore, which, no matter how much you scale this up, isn't going to be her biggest performing ability. Then one for her Sunny Disposition, one for Unctuous Uggy, which is important to scale her own personal damage, as is every other fallbacks version of this. Her pre-stack via the first specialization choice in Self-Taught or Ancestor's Shadow, and finally one for ultimate attack cooldown. Her feats are very standard, what you would expect to find between some all-champ damage, personal DPS, formation ability boosting, and of course you'll want to pay attention for pre-stack buffs. You're looking for those that buff Self-Taught, Ancestor's Shadow, and Uggy, and she does have an ability score increase as a tier reward through the event, which will be important for her availability. But first, let's take a look at her achievement and variants. Her achievement is fairly simple, as long as you intend to use her. Simply gather 2,500 books on her. Now I will take a second to note it appears as right now, she needs to actually be present for the boss kill, meaning skipping a boss with Briv will not allow her to gain books. This might be changed in the near future, I'm not sure if this is intended or not. Her first variant will have her start in the formation with her Sunny Disposition ability unlocked, and she cannot be moved or removed. Only Cazrin and champions buffed by both her Sunny Disposition and Uggy can deal damage. 1 to 2 animated T-set construct spawns with each wave. They don't drop gold nor count toward quest progress. Overall, this shouldn't prove any trouble for anyone, as you simply need to have your DPS being buffed by Cazrin. In her second variant, Cazrin will start in the formation, where she can be moved but not removed. Starting in Area 11, a thrown mug hits a random champion every second, dealing 25% of their max health and damage. This does not happen for the first 5 seconds of every area. Also, 2 revelers will join the formation. They are so distracting that champions next to them deal no damage with their base attacks. This is meant to align with her protection from Mage Armor, as after the first hit it should proc Mage Armor and give you a damage negation buff. But having 2 slots taken up in the formation is quite a restriction and may prove annoying to get that deep push. Her third will have her start in the formation, where she also can be moved but not removed. Here you can only use good champions, champions with a melee or ranged attack, or fallbacks champions to align with her first specialization choice. This is limiting, but overall this does encompass a lot of champions. The only people who should be hurting here are those who focus on magical-based teams. However, starting at Area 11 again, a thrown rock hits a random champion every second, dealing 25% of their max health and damage and stunning them for 3 seconds. Again, like the previous, this does not happen for the first 5 seconds of an area. And at the start of each boss area, a shambling mound spawns as an additional boss. It must also be defeated in order to progress. As long as you have a decent roster to fill those roles of melee, ranged, fallbacks, and good champions, you should be okay here. What about that availability? Overall, she has a good baseline availability, made perfect by that feat we were talking about before, which is her Tier 4 reward of the event. Unfortunately, it's a rather deep reward, but if we do consider this feat, she makes it into every Day 1 Trials restriction and every single patron, which is important as a DPS champion in my opinion. Without this feat, however, she will not make it into the Day 1 trial, and she will not be qualified for Zariel. So, how good is Cazrin? Overall, she's really good. We have a pre-stack that scales up, not the best pre-stack, but a good pre-stack, as well as offering Uggy. And she's a DPS. Does she perform as a DPS herself? As long as she is slotted with the fallbacks, yes. And that will only increase in time as we get more fallbacks champions. Is she currently going to be the best DPS in the game? No. But she does have potential depending on what we see in the future to be a really great DPS pick. Her availability is perfect if we consider that feat, and for those who use Artemis, we are talking about a DPS champion with a pre-stack scaling positional with a second positional ability as well in Uggy. She is in Yorvin's seat, and Yorvin has become a popular pick for Artemis, but Cazrin will be a top contender. But again, we're talking about a DPS support with a pre-stack with perfect availability in a new and becoming very useful affiliation. We're talking about an A+ champion. Now let's take a look at what champions you might want to be flex slotting this event. There's a couple of okay options and a couple that are not okay. So let's just work from the top to the bottom. At the top we've got Bobby, who scales actually quite well with item levels, is a common pick for Artemis, but he does suffer from a lack of availability. However, he is a decent pick overall, as even if you don't use him actively, he's suited for a background party, granting you more scales of Tiamat in the background while he pushes. Then we have Certainty Dran, who is a mediocre pick. She can work well with the Acquisitions Incorporated, and has alright gold find, but overall is again very mediocre. Then we have Corazon, who, honestly at the end of the day, I could barely recommend unlocking. He does have a unique mechanic in making people count as neutral, but that really doesn't pay out anymore, and his overall buffing is some of the lowest in the game. He does at least have an ultimate that does shred armored bosses, however. But when it comes to item level scaling, again, one of the worst. And then we have Dahani, the DPS of the Rivals of Waterdeep. Overall, she's an alright DPS, but these days, especially when we're talking about DPS, she doesn't quite put up the numbers as others, and that's really the only role she serves anymore. So, when put up against other DPS, she kinda falls flat. But I've always wanted her to be good, and I enjoy her kit. Then we have Egbert, the classic, the egg boy himself. Ultimately, if you're a dirty gold farmer with Makos bombing, he is the best gold find in seat. Beyond that, he has some niche utility, but he doesn't scale well with item level. Then we have Puent, who is a decent champion, but as is the theme, it seems, with most of these champions, very mediocre and doesn't scale that well with gear. Then we have Stokey, who did recently, well, relatively recently, get a rework that was unfortunately a bit lackluster, and at the time I did overplace her. She was in a weird time where reworks weren't really popping off like they have been lately. And at the time, it was nice to have her upgraded gold find, but then right away we got Eric, who already blew her out of the water in the same seat for gold find. And her equipment scaling isn't that great, and she's kind of in the same rank as Puent. Then we have Torregar, kind of the same scenario, who kind of maintains fitting the theme, as I realize a lot of these champions might not be that worth it. He's alright and perfectly usable if you have an evil DPS, but is he going to be an instant lock into any kind of formation these days? No. And does he scale great with equipment? No. Is he worth an unlock if you have an evil DPS for someone to fall back on? Maybe. But as we look back through all these champions, I'm not seeing a lot of right away, bright, shining light, pick me, pick me. This might be a time to just fill out your roster, or hang on to those time gate pieces. Thanks for dropping in. Hit that like, sub, and bell for me. Leave a comment on what you think about Cazrin. Make sure you join the Tyredack community Discord if that's your thing. Come check me out on Twitch, and make time for yourself so you can have a hell of a time out there, champion.